They told me the night shift at the old Arizona toll booth was easy money. Just keep the gate down, take the tolls, and follow the rules. That was it. It's the quietest job you'll ever have, the supervisor had said, handing me the keys with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. The booth sat in the middle of nowhere, miles of desert stretching out in every direction. The road was empty most nights, except for the occasional trucker or lost traveler passing through. Still, I needed the money, and honestly, the idea of a peaceful night alone didn't sound too bad. When I arrived for my first shift, the sun was bleeding into the horizon, turning the desert red and gold. The booth was small, just big enough for a chair, a counter, an old cash register, and a small mirror nailed to the wall. The fluorescent light inside buzzed constantly, flickering every few seconds like it was breathing. On the back wall, taped unevenly, was a single sheet of paper. The words were typed, faded with age, but still clear enough to read. It said, "If someone who looks exactly like you asks for change, don't speak. If you hear footsteps on the roof, turn off the lights and hold your breath. Never look in the mirror after 3:13 a.m. I remember standing there, staring at that paper for a full minute, half expecting it to be a joke left behind by the last guy. But the way it was taped, dead center, perfectly flat, it felt intentional, like a warning that had been followed for years. I laughed to myself, shook my head, and sat down in the squeaky chair. Maybe it was just some weird local superstition. People in small towns had those. The first few hours were uneventful. A couple of cars came by, headlights cutting through the dark, drivers half asleep and barely glancing my way. I collected the tolls, waved them through, and watched the taillights disappear into the emptiness. The desert at night has this strange kind of silence. It's not peaceful, it's heavy, like the air itself is listening. Around midnight, the temperature dropped hard. I turned on the little space heater under the counter, but it only hummed and blew cold air. I pulled my jacket tighter and poured myself some coffee from the thermos I brought. That's when I noticed something odd. The mirror on the wall, small, square, and dirty, was facing the window instead of me. Like someone had turned it deliberately to reflect what was outside the booth. I adjusted it to fix my hair, and for a brief second, I could have sworn the reflection of the booth behind me was darker than it should have been. No light. Just black. I blinked and it was normal again. I laughed quietly, blaming the caffeine. At 1:30 a.m. I heard it. Tap, 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 like something small hitting the roof. Maybe a bird, I thought, or sand blowing against the metal. But then came footsteps, slow, heavy, one after another. My first instinct was to look out the window, but I froze when I remembered the second rule. If you hear footsteps on the roof, turn off the lights and hold your breath. I hesitated for a few seconds, then flipped the switch. The booth went dark instantly, and I sat there in complete silence. My heart pounded in my chest. The footsteps continued above me, dragging from one end of the booth to the other. Then they stopped right above my head. I held my breath. Something was crouching up there. I could hear it shift, the metal creaking under its weight. And then a sound that chilled my blood. It exhaled, long and shaky, like someone breathing through cracked lips. I bit my tongue to stop myself from gasping. It stayed like that for maybe 30 seconds, just breathing above me before the sound faded into the distance. I didn't move for a full minute after that. When I finally turned the lights back on, the booth looked exactly the same. Nothing broken, nothing strange. I told myself it was probably an animal, maybe a coyote or a vulture. I wrote it off as nerves and got back to work. By 2:30, my eyelids were heavy. I stood up, stretched, and stepped outside for a quick smoke. The desert was quiet again. The stars so bright they didn't look real. I leaned against the booth, looking out at the endless road. The air was cold still. I was starting to relax when the intercom inside the booth crackled to life. A faint voice came through, distorted by static. "Hey," it said, "can you open the gate?" I frowned. I hadn't seen any headlights. The road was empty. I put out my cigarette and stepped back inside. The monitor that showed the small camera feed at the gate was flickering. And then I saw him. Me, standing outside the toll gate, wearing the same uniform, the same jacket, the same tired expression. My stomach turned cold. He raised his hand, waved casually like it was no big deal. "Hey, it's me," the voice said again through the intercom. I forgot my ID inside. "Can you open the gate?" Every instinct screamed that something was wrong. The voice wasn't just similar, it was exactly mine. The tone, the hesitation, even the way I breathed between words. I stared at the rule sheet taped to the wall. Rule number 1. If someone who looks exactly like you asks for change, don't speak. I didn't know what to do. My throat went dry. The intercom crackled again. Come on, man. It's freezing out here. He stepped closer to the camera, and for the first time, I noticed the eyes. They were just a little too wide, the pupils too dark. His smile was stretched a little too long. I reached for the light switch, hand shaking. Please, he said softly, pressing a hand to the glass of the toll gate. It's cold. Let me in. The way he said it, it didn't sound like begging. It sounded like mimicking, like something trying to sound human. I turned off the lights and dropped to the floor. My heart was hammering. Outside, the sound of footsteps moved toward the booth, slow and deliberate. Gravel crunched under heavy boots. I covered my mouth, trying not to breathe too loud. Then a gentle knock on the window, 3 taps. Even. Calm. Hey, the voice whispered through the glass. Why are you hiding? I didn't answer. I didn't move. The sound of nails or claws scraped down the side of the booth. Then silence. I stayed still, listening, counting seconds. 1 minute, 2, 3, nothing. Finally, I dared to peek out the window. The road was empty again. My other self was gone. I didn't sleep for the rest of the shift. I kept my eyes on that rule sheet, rereading it over and over. Whoever wrote those rules, they weren't joking. When the first light of dawn hit the desert, I stepped outside. The cold air hit me like a slap. There were footprints in the dirt, mine, and another set that stopped right beside them. Barefoot, I didn't wait for my replacement. I got in my car and drove, not looking back. That was 3 nights ago. Today, my boss called and asked why I left early. He said the morning guard found the booth empty, the gate open, and my uniform jacket folded neatly on the chair. He asked if I'd come back for another shift tonight. Said they really needed someone reliable. But here's the thing. When I checked the security footage he sent me, my blood ran cold. At 2:47 a.m., the camera shows me standing outside the toll booth, knocking on the window trying to get in. The problem is, I never left the booth. I froze. My reflection in the booth's window didn't move, but the voice outside whispered again, closer this time, almost tender. Come on, I forgot my ID. My breath caught in my throat. I remembered the rule instantly. Never open the gate for yourself. My hand hovered over the light switch before I quickly shut everything off. The booth went pitch black, the hum of electricity dying out, leaving only the desert wind pressing against the thin walls. I crouched low behind the counter, my pulse thudding in my ears. The silence lasted maybe 10 seconds before I heard it. Slow, heavy footsteps circling the booth. Gravel crunching, dragging. 1 step, 2, then a pause. I could hear breathing, deep and steady, inches away from the glass. The voice came again, quieter now, almost mocking. You're not supposed to hide from yourself, you know. I didn't move. I didn't even blink. My heart was pounding so hard it felt like the whole booth could hear it. The thing outside continued to walk around, tapping the glass with something that sounded like nails instead of fingers. Then it stopped right behind me, near the back wall where the small mirror hung. I couldn't see it, but I could feel it, like a weight pressing through the glass. 3 knocks, sharp, precise. Let me in, it whispered, the words dragging like they hurt to speak. Please, it's cold. I wanted to scream, to run out into the desert, but the darkness outside felt worse than the thing at the door. My eyes adjusted to the dim light from the moon leaking through the window, and that's when I saw it. My reflection in the glass wasn't mine anymore. It was staring straight at me, eyes wide, mouth curved into an unnatural smile that stretched too far. When it smiled, I heard the faint sound of skin tearing. A thin crack appeared at the corner of its mouth, blood, dark and thick, running down its chin. I clamped a hand over my mouth to keep from making a sound. The thing outside leaned closer to the window. The glass creaked under the pressure. I couldn't see its full face now, just the eyes. My eyes, but too glossy, too black, like something had hollowed them out and filled them with ink. Then it whispered again, softer this time. If you don't open the door, I will. The intercom clicked suddenly, bursting with static. My body jerked at the sound. Through the distortion, the voice returned, laughing quietly now, almost playfully. You're breaking the rules, remember? You're supposed to keep the gate closed, not the door. I didn't touch the intercom. I just stayed on the floor, staring at that mirror on the back wall. That's when I realized something worse. My reflection wasn't crouching like me anymore. It was standing, tall and still, staring down at me like I was the intruder. The lights flickered for a split second, and I saw it move its head to the side, smiling wider. Then, silence. I waited, counting in my head, forcing my breathing to slow down. 1 minute passed. 2, nothing. I finally stood up, trembling, and turned the lights back on. The booth looked exactly the same as before. Empty, quiet. But when I looked out through the window, the footprints in the gravel were wrong. They weren't spaced like a person walking. They were too far apart, like whatever had been circling me had been crawling on all fours. I grabbed my phone, ready to call the supervisor, but there was no signal. Not even a single bar. That's when the power flickered again, and the lights went out completely this time. The heater shut off. The radio went dead. I was surrounded by complete darkness. Then I heard something new. Knocking, not on the window this time, but under the floor. 3 slow knocks, like it was coming from the crawl space beneath the booth. I backed up fast, my knees hitting the counter. The knocking moved, crawling from under the booth to the door. Then a long pause, a whisper. I'm inside. Every hair on my body stood up. I turned toward the mirror and my heart stopped. There were now 2 reflections, mine and another one standing behind me. I didn't dare look over my shoulder. The reflection behind me was moving closer, smiling wider, its head twitching slightly to one side. The glass of the mirror started to fog as if something was breathing on it from the inside. Then words began to appear, written in that fog, one shaky letter at a time. Turn around. I couldn't move. My body refused. I just stood there watching those letters fade slowly. Then the reflection tilted its head again and raised a hand. My hand. It waved slowly at me, its smile splitting wider, tearing the skin around its mouth. Blood trickled down its neck. A noise came from behind me, something wet dragging across the floor. I turned before I could stop myself. There was nothing there, just the empty booth, the dark desert beyond the glass. But then, on the window, a face appeared in the reflection. My face. Too close, pressed against the glass, smiling. I screamed and stumbled backward. The reflection stayed. It wasn't copying me anymore. It was doing its own thing. It pressed both hands to the glass and began tapping slowly, in rhythm with my heartbeat. I grabbed the flashlight from the drawer and pointed it at the window. Nothing. The moment the beam hit, the face disappeared. I was alone again. I didn't even realize I was crying until I felt the tears on my face. I checked the time. 3:12 a.m., 1 minute until the last rule kicked in. Never look in the mirror after 3:13 a.m. I didn't want to risk it. I turned the mirror toward the wall and sat in the corner, clutching the flashlight, waiting for the sky to lighten. Every little sound made me jump. The wind, the creak of the booth, the whisper of sand against the window, it all sounded alive. Then, exactly at 3:13, something hit the booth so hard it shook the walls. I screamed, dropping the flashlight. The sound came again, louder this time, like something slamming against the roof. I remembered the second rule and switched off the light immediately. In the darkness, I could hear something crawling up there again. The same slow steps, dragging claws and heavy breathing. Then, through the ceiling vent, I heard it whisper. You shouldn't have looked. Something dripped down from the vent, thick, warm drops that landed on my shoulder. I didn't move. I didn't even dare breathe. When the dripping stopped, I slowly reached up with my shaking hand and touched it. My fingers came back red. The thing on the roof moved again, faster now, circling above like a predator waiting for the right moment. Then silence. The longest silence I've ever known. When dawn finally came, I was still sitting there, shaking, gripping the flashlight like a weapon. The sun painted the desert gold again, and I thought it was over. I opened the booth door and stepped outside. That's when I saw them, 2 sets of footprints leading away from the booth. Both mine. I followed them a few steps before I stopped. The second set didn't walk straight. They wandered, zigzagging across the sand, dragging slightly like whoever, or whatever. Didn't fully understand how to move like a person. The tracks led toward the horizon, fading into the desert. I quit that morning, packed my stuff, left my keys on the counter, and drove until I saw other cars again. I told myself it was all in my head, some kind of hallucination brought on by lack of sleep. But last night I got a voicemail from an unknown number. When I played it, I nearly dropped my phone. It was my own voice, calm and steady, whispering one sentence. You left before I could clock out.